Tycoon left wife no inheritance. 3 years later, he saw her with twins at a fancy wedding. Outside the enormous glass windows of the Min family estate, dark clouds painted the horizon in hues of gray. Inside, the air was thick with tension, as if the storm outside had seeped into the marble floors and gold-framed halls. Daniel Min stood at the edge of the study, a tumbler of untouched whiskey in his hand. His tailored navy suit, perfectly pressed, couldn't hide the restlessness in his posture. He was 34, a man admired for his control, his power, and his intimidating silence. But tonight, he wasn't the tycoon the world knew. Tonight, he was a man on the verge of breaking. From behind him, a soft voice broke through the quiet. "Daniel, are you sure they'll let me come to the dinner tomorrow?" He turned. There she stood, Hannah Lee, his wife of 2 years, wrapped in a simple beige cardigan, her long black hair tied in a loose braid. Her eyes, always full of warmth, now held the cautious hope of someone who'd spent a lifetime trying to belong. The difference between them was visible in everything. In the worn soles of her shoes, in the way she nervously rubbed her fingers together, in how she called his family they. Daniel looked at her for a moment before answering. "They won't say anything if I bring you, but don't expect a warm welcome." Hannah lowered her gaze. She nodded, the disappointment etched across her face though she tried to hide it. "I just thought, maybe after 2 years, things would be different." "They're not," he said flatly, swallowing the bitterness in his voice. He hadn't meant to sound so cold, but it had been building. The pressure, the comments, the late-night phone calls from his stepmother, the matriarch of the Min fortune, whispering poison disguised as concern. "She's not one of us, Daniel. You're making a fool of yourself. You could have married anyone, someone who wouldn't embarrass the Min name. You know she only wanted your money." At first, he fought them all. At first, love had been louder. He remembered the first time he saw her, in the small public hospital where he'd gone undercover as part of a corporate charity project. She was treating a little boy with a scraped knee, humming a lullaby softly as she cleaned the wound. She hadn't looked up when he entered. She hadn't cared who he was. And maybe that was what drew him in. Hannah, with her sincerity, her awkward laugh, her stubborn belief that kindness wasn't weakness. He'd proposed after just 3 months. His world had never made sense before her. He thought he was rescuing her from her modest life, but maybe she had rescued him from his own emptiness. So why did he feel so far from her now? Hannah moved toward him, placing her hand gently on his arm. "You've been so distant lately," she whispered. Are you unhappy with me?" His jaw clenched. "No," he lied, but the lie stung both of them. She took a slow breath, blinking away tears. "Because I am happy with you, Daniel. Even when they ignore me, even when I walk into a room and I know they wish I weren't there, I still look at you and think, this is my home. You are my home." A lump formed in his throat. He wanted to tell her everything. That he hated the way his family treated her. That he knew he'd failed to protect her. That sometimes he was afraid of losing everything. Not the company, not the money, but her. But instead, he said, "You don't need to come tomorrow." Her hand dropped from his arm like it had been burned. "You mean you don't want me there? I just think it'll be easier. Less stressful for both of us." "You mean less embarrassing for you?" she said, her voice suddenly sharp, though her eyes were breaking. "You're ashamed of me." He didn't deny it, and the silence said more than words ever could. She turned away, trying to collect herself. But then she stopped. Slowly, she reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She held it out to him, hand trembling. He looked at it, confused. "What is this?" "I was going to wait until tomorrow, but I can't now. Not after this." He unfolded the paper. It was a medical report. He read the words, "Pregnancy confirmed. Estimated 6 weeks." He looked up at her, stunned. "You're pregnant?" Hannah nodded. "Yes, I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid. But I thought if I told you, maybe things would start to feel warm again. Like before." Daniel took a step back, his mind spiraling. A child with Hannah. his child. It should have filled him with joy, but instead he felt panic, pressure. What would his family say? Would they even accept the child? Would they use it against him? He looked at her, this woman he had once called his everything, and for a split second, he hated that he had ever let the world touch them. "I need some air," he said, voice cold, distant, and he left. Hannah stood alone in that vast room, the paper still fluttering in her hand. The rain outside had turned into a storm. She pressed a hand to her belly. "Don't worry," she whispered through tears. "You'll be loved. Even if it's just me. You'll be loved." But deep down, something inside her began to crack. She had always believed in love. But now, love was becoming something she had to survive. Shall I continue with topic 2 next? Following the same style and emotional depth? Você diz. Certo? Agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a história sem marcos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conte sobre o tópico tu com dialogo como su faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita emoção. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters o ChatGPT diz. Of course, here's the full emotional development of topic 2. Continuing the story in a linear narrative, told as if you're watching a heartfelt, slow-burning Korean drama, full of emotional conflict, vulnerability, and raw dialogue. No labels, just story. The hospital lights flickered softly in the corridor, casting long shadows on the pale floor. The world felt sterile, too white, too quiet, too empty. Hannah sat alone on the examination bed, her fingers gripping the sides of the paper sheet beneath her. Her eyes were red, not from the pregnancy symptoms, but from the nights she hadn't slept. She had been holding herself together like fragile porcelain, but cracks were beginning to show. The doctor sat in front of her, reviewing the results. He was gentle, careful, like someone trying not to drop something already broken. "Hannah," he said slowly, "I need to be honest with you." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "You're pregnant, with twins." Her lips parted in disbelief, not fear, not yet. A spark of warmth flashed across her chest. Twins, 2 little hearts beating inside her. But the doctor didn't smile. He continued, "But there's a complication. Your immune system is weaker than it should be. Your iron levels are critically low, and there are signs of early placental insufficiency. It's not dangerous now, but it will require constant monitoring. Rest, nutrition. You'll need support, Hannah. You cannot go through this alone." She looked down at her hands. They trembled slightly. "I'm not alone," she said, barely a whisper. "I have my husband." The doctor hesitated. "Then he needs to be here. These next few months won't be easy, emotionally or physically." Hannah forced a smile. "He's just busy. Business. But once I tell him, he'll come around." But she was lying, and she knew it. Daniel hadn't spoken to her in 2 days. After she told him she was pregnant, he'd vanished into meetings, into silence. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't asked if she was okay. She climbed into the cab home that evening, pressing her fingers to her belly as the city lights blurred outside the window. Twins. A miracle. A burden. A storm inside her, both beautiful and terrifying. The mansion was quiet when she entered. She didn't expect a welcome, not from the cold-faced housekeeper who barely acknowledged her anymore. She moved up the marble stairs, slowly, carefully. When she entered their bedroom, Daniel was seated at the desk. His laptop was open, face lit by the glow of numbers and charts. He didn't look up when she walked in. "I saw the doctor today," she said softly. "Nothing. Twins," she added, a hint of hope in her voice. "We're having twins." He paused for a second and then resumed typing. "I see." Her throat tightened. "That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say, Hannah?" His voice was clipped, distant. "Congratulations." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I want you to feel something. Anything. I'm carrying your children, Daniel. Our children. And you won't even look at me." Finally, he turned, and his eyes, once so full of warmth and longing, were like ice. "Maybe I never wanted children." She staggered back a step, as if his words had struck her physically. He rose from the chair and walked toward her, passing without touching. "You should rest. I have an early flight tomorrow." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You used to love me." He stopped at the door. "I used to think I did," he replied before leaving. That night, she curled into a ball on the bed where they once made promises. Her hand clutched her stomach as if trying to shield the life growing inside. She sobbed into the sheets, letting herself shatter in the dark. And still, she whispered to them, to the hearts beating within her, "I'm sorry. I don't know how I'll do this, but I promise I'll love you enough for both of us." Days passed, then weeks. The loneliness turned into routine. Appointments were attended alone. Baby names were chosen alone. She started keeping a journal, not for herself, but for her children. A record of her love, so they'd know one day that even in silence, they were wanted. Every heartbeat was a promise she refused to break. And Daniel, he drifted further away. Longer business trips, cold glances, conversations reduced to logistics, and always that unspoken wall between them. He didn't come to the ultrasound where she first heard both heartbeats at once. He didn't see the flicker of life on the screen. He missed it by choice. One morning, she walked into the grand dining room, clutching a small envelope. Her hands trembled. "I want to talk," she said. Daniel was reading the paper. He didn't respond. "It's from the hospital. About the twins." He sighed and set the paper down. "What now?" "I need help, Daniel," she said, voice cracking. "I'm scared, and I can't keep pretending you're not abandoning me." He looked at her like she was an obligation. "You think I'm abandoning you?" he asked, rising slowly. "You think I'm the villain here?" "I think you stopped loving me the moment I became inconvenient," she whispered. Daniel stared at her. Something flickered in his gaze. Maybe guilt, maybe nothing. He walked over, took the envelope from her hand, and set it down without opening it. "Maybe you should go," he said, "back to wherever you came from. Be with people like you." She blinked. "People like me? You don't belong in this world, Hannah. You never did. And I'm tired of pretending." Her knees buckled. He walked away. That afternoon, she packed her things slowly. Just the essentials. Some clothes, her medical papers, a small photo from their honeymoon. She stared at it for a long time, then left it on the nightstand. As she stepped out the door for the last time, she looked back at the mansion. It had never been home. Not really. And now she carried her entire world inside her. She walked away, alone, pregnant, unclaimed, but alive, because something inside her, beneath the grief, the shame, the unbearable ache, was still beating. Two hearts, and hers. A voice on the intercom crackled above. "Bus 218 departing for Namhe. Last call." Hannah stood slowly, feeling the weight of her body shift. She was only a few months along, but the fatigue settled into her bones like lead. With one hand on her belly and the other gripping the strap of her bag, she stepped toward the bus that would take her far from Seoul, far from the life that had betrayed her. She didn't look back. No one was watching anyway. The next few weeks blurred into something between survival and solitude. Namhe, with its peaceful coastline and quiet hills, was nothing like the glittering skyline of the city she had once tried to call home. But that was what made it safer. Anonymous. She rented a single room above a modest flower shop run by an elderly woman named Mrs. Kim, who didn't ask many questions. When Hannah fainted one morning while helping her sweep petals, Mrs. Kim insisted she move in permanently and refused to charge rent. "Just promise me," the old woman said, her voice firm yet warm, "you'll take care of those babies, and let me help you when you can't." Hannah cried that night for the first time in weeks. But this time it wasn't from sorrow. It was from the ache of unexpected kindness. As winter melted into spring, her belly grew round, and her silence turned into humming. She began learning the language of flowers, helping Mrs. Kim wrap stems in twine, tie bows on bridal bouquets, and arrange tiny glass vases by the window. The sunlight warmed her skin. For moments at a time, it felt like she might be healing. And then one morning, her phone buzzed. It had been silent for weeks, tucked deep into the drawer she never opened. But now, the screen lit up with a single notification. Final notice. Probate and estate division. Regarding the inheritance of Mr. Min Tae-jun. Her fingers froze. Tae-jun, Daniel's father. She opened the message, her heart pounding. The message was clear. The will had been finalized. Assets distributed. And Hannah had been left nothing. Not even acknowledgement. No letter. No apology. No mention of her name. Her chest tightened. She hadn't expected anything, not really. But this was erasure. It meant that even in death, the Min family had chosen to pretend she had never existed. That her children, still unborn, were not heirs. Were not worthy. Tears slid down her cheeks as she sat on the edge of her small bed. The quiet hum of the seaside town suddenly feeling so far away. A knock at the door broke her trance. "Hannah?" Mrs. Kim called gently. "There's a visitor for you downstairs." A doctor. Her heart leapt in confusion. She descended the stairs cautiously and found a man in a white coat sipping tea with Mrs. Kim. He was tall, with kind eyes and silver dusting his temples. When he saw Hannah, he stood. "You must be Miss Lee," he said, bowing slightly. "I'm Dr. Seo. I'm a retired obstetrician. Mrs. Kim is an old friend. She said you might need someone." Hannah looked to the older woman, who gave her a firm nod. "I already asked him," she said. "And he said he'd look after you, free of charge. He used to run the maternity clinic before the city closed it." I can't let you." "You can," Mrs. Kim interrupted. "You're not alone here." The weeks that followed were filled with slow healing and slower trust. Dr. Seo checked her regularly, teaching her how to monitor her breathing, her blood pressure. He taught her to rest when her heart raced and to listen when her body whispered. "You're strong," he said one morning as he listened to the baby's heartbeats. "But don't mistake strength for silence. It's okay to need others." She smiled at that, a real smile. But even as peace began to grow, the weight of what she had left behind refused to fade. Daniel never called. Not once. No apology. No questions. No voice message. No "Are you alive?" It was as though she had been erased, just like from the will. And sometimes, late at night, when the shop was closed and the town fell quiet, she would lie awake and imagine what she would say to him if he ever came looking for her. "You gave up before I did. You walked away before I broke. And now I carry everything you left behind." One morning, the contractions started. Too early. Dr. Seo rushed her to a clinic in the neighboring town. There were complications. One baby's heart rate dropped. The staff moved fast. Too fast for Hannah to understand anything except the word surgery. She was wheeled into a cold room. And in that moment, with lights above her and nurses holding her arms, Hannah whispered one name she hadn't spoken aloud in months. "Daniel." Not in anger, not in longing, just in pain. And then darkness. When she woke, two bassinets stood by the window, light falling softly across the newborn's tiny faces. She cried when she saw them. They looked like him. Every feature, the brows, the lips, the small stubborn jaws, it was all Daniel. And yet they were hers. Completely hers. Dr. Seo placed a hand on her shoulder. "They're healthy," he said. "Tiny, but strong. Just like their mother." She nodded, reaching out to touch their fingers. "I want to name them," she said softly. "Not after anyone. Just something new. Something mine." And so, she gave them names filled with light and hope. For the next few days, she didn't let them go. She fed them, sang to them, whispered stories she would one day tell them about oceans and flowers and stars. But never once did she say the word father. Never once did she say Daniel, because some names, she realized, are better left unspoken. Hannah sat in the rocking chair, her arms wrapped around both of her newborn sons. their tiny chests rising and falling against her. She was thinner than before, paler. The emergency birth had taken more from her than she expected. Not just physically, but emotionally, like a piece of her soul had been cracked wide open and was still trying to heal. She looked down at their faces, those little sleeping copies of a man who had vanished from her. Life without a trace. It was surreal sometimes, that even now, even after everything, the curve of their eyelashes could still make her heart ache with memory. "You don't know it yet," she whispered, voice raw. But he walked away, before he ever knew you existed. One of the boys stirred, a soft coo escaping his lips. She kissed his forehead gently, pressing her cheek against his soft hair. "I promise you won't need him." The words were brave. They were the words she had to say to survive. But the truth was bitter and silent beneath them. She had needed him. She had wanted him to come back. Even after the betrayal, the rejection, the cold silence. She had waited, and he never came. A week later, Mrs. Kim entered the nursery with a soft knock. "You have a letter." Hannah didn't lift her eyes. "From who?" "No return address. Just your name and sole postmark." Hannah felt something twist in her stomach. She rose from the chair carefully, placing the babies in their bassinets. She took the envelope, hands trembling. Inside, there was no note, just a printed letter, formal, cold. Official statement of will and testament, final distribution of assets. She read every line. Min Tae-jun had passed peacefully. Daniel Min, sole heir. No mention of spouse. No mention of descendants from previous union. Nothing about her. Nothing about the twins. Just like that, her life erased with ink. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, the letter slipping from her hands. It floated to the floor without sound, like it didn't matter, like it wasn't the confirmation of everything she had feared. They never saw her as family. They never saw her children as blood. A scream rose in her throat, but she swallowed it, because the babies were still sleeping, and she couldn't fall apart. Not in front of them. That night, she stood by the window, watching the ocean breathe beneath the moonlight. Her hands clenched the windowsill. If there was still a part of her that hoped he would come, it died tonight. And yet, somewhere, in a glossy glass tower in Seoul, Daniel Min sat at his desk, staring at the exact same ocean, though it was only a painting in his office. Min-ji entered without knocking. "We'll need your signature for the foundation ceremony next week," she said smoothly. "Investors want photos. Something about softening your image." He didn't look at her. "Did you hear me?" Daniel nodded slowly, eyes distant. "Is there a problem?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, just tired." She walked behind him and placed her hands on his shoulders. "You've worked hard these last 3 years. You rebuilt the company. You're a leader now. You made the right choice, Daniel." His jaw tensed. "The right choice," he echoed. "Right?" She leaned in, her voice softening. "She never belonged here." He didn't reply. Instead, he stood abruptly, brushing her hands away. "I need air." Without waiting for her reaction, he grabbed his coat and left the office. His driver tried to catch up, but Daniel ignored him, walking down the street with no destination in mind. It had been 3 years. 3 years since he'd seen Hannah. 3 years since he'd heard her voice. He told himself it was for the best, that she was better off, that he was sparing her a life of scrutiny, pressure, manipulation. But in the silence of the night, none of those excuses held weight anymore. The truth haunted him. He had been a coward. He had left her in the worst moment of her life, pregnant, fragile, lost, and turned his back because it was easier than fighting for her, because it was easier than loving her the way she deserved. He still remembered her eyes the last time she looked at him, broken, as if something inside her had died. And he had done that. A memory flashed, her hand on her stomach, the word twins, and his own refusal to feel anything. The cold way he had walked out, how he hadn't followed, hadn't even turned around. He stood now under the city lights, soaked in regret. A woman walked past, pushing a stroller. The baby inside gurgled, laughing up at the stars. Daniel turned away, jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone. For a brief second, his thumb hovered over the search bar. He typed her name, Hannah Lee. Nothing. No social media. No photos. No news. It was like she had disappeared from the world. And maybe that was her choice. Maybe she wanted to be erased. But a voice inside him whispered something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. What if she never stopped waiting? He closed his eyes. He could almost hear her laugh again. Soft, awkward, beautiful. The way she used to hum while arranging wildflowers. The way she always stood on her toes to kiss him, even though he always bent down. He missed her, not the memory of her. The real woman, with flaws and warmth and fierce loyalty. The woman he should have fought for. The boys had just turned 2. They were taller now, still small but sturdy. Curious eyes, stubborn tempers, gentle laughs. They looked more and more like Daniel each day, but it no longer stung the way it used to. Now it felt like a distant echo of a life she no longer reached for. A wound that had scarred over, not painless but no longer bleeding. Hannah moved slowly through the shop, humming under her breath as she arranged a bouquet for a local wedding. Her fingers moved with care, twisting delicate ribbons into place, securing each bloom like a secret kept close to the heart. Upstairs, she could hear the twins laughing with Mrs. Kim. The sound was her anchor, her salvation. Then the bell above the shop door rang. She turned, half expecting a familiar face, maybe a local friend or the postman who always flirted too kindly. But instead, it was a stranger. A young woman stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, holding a velvet folder with trembling hands. "Are you Hannah Lee?" she asked, voice uncertain. Hannah blinked. "Yes. Can I help you? I was told to find you. I work for a client. He wishes to send you flowers for a large-scale event. A wedding, elite guests, soul society." She handed the folder to Hannah. "He's looking for someone who understands emotion in their work." Hannah opened it cautiously. Dozens of pages, sketches, table designs, color palettes, and at the bottom, an official seal from a luxury venue in Seoul. "This is a major event," Hannah murmured, flipping through the pages. "Why come all the way out here?" The woman shifted, nervous. "He said you're the only one who could bring life to the flowers. That you don't arrange them. You feel them." Hannah hesitated. The request was strange. Flattering, yes, but the kind of opportunity that didn't knock twice. Seoul was a world she had long left behind. A world where whispers hurt more than knives and where love had turned to dust. "I'll think about it," she said. The woman nodded. "He said you would. But if you agree," he asked for one thing. "What?" "That you deliver them yourself." Something in Hannah's chest pulled tight. "Who is the client?" she asked, trying to sound casual. The woman looked down. "He didn't want me to say." The bell rang again as the door closed behind her, leaving Hannah in silence. She stared at the folder for a long time, and for the first time in years, she felt something sharp in her ribs. A name she hadn't said aloud in a long, long time. That night, after putting the twins to bed, she stood by the window. Rain tapped against the glass like 1,000 small questions. The folder lay open on the table behind her, pages lit softly by the desk lamp. She turned to Dr. Seo, who had come by for dinner and lingered, sensing something wasn't right. "Do you think people can change?" she asked, voice low. He looked at her for a moment. "Sometimes," he said, "but not all do." "And if they return?" she asked. "After years." He smiled gently. "Then it depends on what they bring back. Regret or love, guilt or courage." She nodded, not saying anything. In her heart, a quiet war had begun. The next morning, she agreed to take the job. It took a week to prepare. She worked late into the night, trimming stems with trembling hands, braiding vines into crowns, layering scent and memory into every petal. She poured into those arrangements every part of her that had once been left behind. Every heartbreak, every lullaby, every lonely sunrise. And finally, the day came. She dressed simply but elegantly. A soft beige dress, long sleeves, hair pinned low. She didn't want to stand out. She only wanted to deliver beauty and then vanish. Mrs. Kim stayed behind with the twins, waving from the window. As Hannah boarded the train to Seoul, something inside her cracked open. Not pain, not quite, but the sharp breath of a past catching up to her. The city hadn't changed. The skyscrapers still touched the clouds. The noise still buzzed in the air like static. The coldness of it, the absence of warmth in people's eyes, it all rushed back. But she wasn't the same. She arrived at the venue before dawn, setting up with a quiet focus that stunned the crew. Tables glowed with candlelight. Orchids lined the marble staircase. Peonies spilled like whispers from crystal vases. It was breathtaking. A few guests began to arrive, elegant, distant, clothed in money and power. She kept her head down, a shadow among silk. But then, a murmur swept through the crowd. A tall man entered, black tuxedo, expression unreadable, his presence enough to silence the room. Daniel Min Hannah froze where she stood, her hands still holding a rose. Her heart stopped. Not from love, not anymore. From shock, from disbelief. He hadn't changed much. A little thinner, more tired. But those eyes, they found her across the room like a magnet. And when they did, he stopped moving. The room disappeared. The silence stretched. She turned away before he could come closer. Her hands trembled. Her breath caught. He was here. After everything. After disappearing. After leaving her to face the darkest moments of her life alone. And now at a wedding. As if this were a coincidence. She walked briskly to the back, to the garden doors, stepping out into the cool evening air. The flowers smelled too sweet. The night too loud. Her heart too full. And then footsteps. Hannah! She closed her eyes. The voice hadn't changed. Deeper, maybe. But the way it said her name, it still held the echo of who they used to be. Don't, she said without turning around. Please. I just want to talk. No, her voice cracked. 3 years, Daniel. 3 years. No calls. No message. Nothing. And now I see you at a wedding. He stepped closer. I didn't know how to find you. But you didn't try. She snapped, turning to face him. Their eyes met. And for a moment, everything fell silent. You left me, she whispered. Pregnant. Sick. Alone. And when I begged you to feel something, you walked away. His eyes filled with something, pain, maybe shame. I was wrong. You were cruel, she corrected. There's a difference. He took another step. I never stopped thinking about you. Not once. She laughed bitterly. Thinking isn't the same as staying. I came back, he said. I'm here. She looked at him, her eyes shining. You're late, she said. And then she turned and walked back inside, leaving him in the garden. Alone. He had rehearsed so many things in his head. Apologies. Justifications. Truths. But none of them mattered now. Not when her voice had gone cold. Not when her eyes no longer softened when they met his. He had missed it. Not just the chance to say sorry. He had missed her, the version of her who still believed in him. And the version of himself that had once been brave enough to deserve her. Inside, the wedding carried on. Glittering laughter. Champagne glasses clinking. But it all felt artificial, like a movie playing in the wrong time zone. His mind was still on the way her dress moved in the light. The way her fingers curled into themselves when she was trying not to cry. He walked back inside. She was gone. Only the scent of roses remained near the arrangements she had built with trembling hands. Someone approached him. Min-ji, in a satin green dress, radiant and flawless. You're pale, she said, tilting her head. Is it the lights, or are you about to do something reckless? Daniel didn't answer. She smirked. Let me guess. She's here. His silence was confirmation enough. You brought her here, didn't you? Min-ji folded her arms. All this entire event, it wasn't about business. You created it so she'd come. So you could finally face her. She deserved a moment, he muttered. She deserved to be seen. Minji stepped closer, her voice sharp now. You think flowers and candles are going to erase what you did? No, he said, staring into the distance. But it's the first honest thing I've done in 3 years. Minji scoffed. Well, good luck. She's not the same woman who cried for you. You don't know her anymore. He turned slowly. That's why I'm here. Minji stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. You really are a fool. But there was no heat in her voice, only a quiet resignation. She knew she had lost him, not because he never loved her, but because part of him had never stopped loving someone else. Back in Namhee, Hannah stepped off the last train of the night. The streets were quiet again, the sea humming in the background. She held her coat tighter around her shoulders, her mind racing. Seeing him again had shaken something loose inside her. Something she had spent years locking away. Not love, not hope, memory, and grief. When she reached the house, Mrs. Kim was sitting at the window as always. She stood when she saw Hannah's face. You saw him, she said. Hannah nodded silently. Mrs. Kim stepped forward and embraced her without a word. After a long moment, Hannah whispered, Why now? Why after all this time? Mrs. Kim pulled back, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. Because regret always arrives too late, child. That's what makes it regret. The next morning, the twins were already awake when Hannah rose. She entered their room quietly, watching as they played with blocks, their small voices full of innocent chatter. They didn't know the world had once nearly forgotten them. They didn't know the man who had given them his eyes had nearly abandoned them before they even took their first breath. And they didn't know that their mother had built an entire universe around protecting them from that truth. Mommy, one of them said, lifting a toy, is today a happy day? Hannah blinked. She smiled, soft and fragile. Every day I see you is a happy day. She gathered them into her arms and closed her eyes. Later that afternoon, she sat on the porch, journal open, pen unmoving. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know what to write. Not because there wasn't anything to say, but because there was too much. A shadow moved past the fence. Her heart stalled. She looked up. Daniel. He was standing just beyond the garden gate. No suit, no mask. Just him. Raw, unsure, smaller than she remembered. He didn't try to come closer. He waited. She stood, slowly, the wooden steps creaking beneath her. The wind picked up between them, brushing past like a whispered warning. I wasn't going to come, he said, voice dry. But then I remembered. I never came when it mattered. So I'm here now, even if it's too late. She didn't speak. I don't want to ask you to forgive me, he continued, because I wouldn't if I were you. I need to see them. I need to know them, even if they never call me anything, even if you don't let me stay. I want to do the one thing I should have done from the beginning. Still, she said nothing. I lost my father, and when I did, I realized I never learned how to be one. He taught me how to run, how to protect a name, an empire, a mask, but never how to hold a child, never how to love without conditions. He looked down at his hands. I don't expect a second chance. I don't deserve it, but if you'll let me see them, I'll stay far enough that you don't have to look at me. I'll just be nearby. A silence stretched between them. Hannah's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She studied him, the man who had once shattered her. And for the first time, she didn't see the version of him she had loved. She saw the version of him that had been lost. The one who didn't know how to love because no one had taught him how. And still, it didn't change the years she had survived without him. She stepped forward, stopping just before the gate. They know nothing about you, she said quietly. Not your name, not your voice, not your absence. And that is the only reason they've grown up happy. He lowered his gaze. But, she added, they'll meet you, not because you deserve them, but because they deserve to know where they came from. He looked up, surprised. Her voice hardened. You want to meet them? Then come tomorrow. As a stranger. Not a father. Not yet. He nodded, his breath catching. And if you hurt them, she whispered, if you let them down even once, I will disappear, Daniel. And this time you won't find me." He bowed his head. "I understand." She turned and walked back into the house, leaving the door half open. She had left the door open yesterday. Now she waited to see if he would truly walk through it. She didn't know what hurt more, the fear that he would come or the fear that he wouldn't. A small voice stirred upstairs. "Mommy?" She placed the tea down and climbed the stairs, brushing her fingers gently through the tousled hair of her sons. "Time to get up," she whispered. "We have a visitor today." "Who?" asked one of them, rubbing his eyes. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she helped them dress. White shirts, soft slacks, matching shoes they rarely wore. She brushed their hair carefully and paused at the mirror, seeing pieces of Daniel stare back at her, mirrored in there. Sleepy eyes and pointed chins. She kissed both their foreheads, heart aching. Then there was a knock at the door. Not loud, almost hesitant. She froze. The boys didn't move. They just looked at her, sensing something unfamiliar in the air. She walked slowly to the door, her fingers tightening on the knob before she pulled it open. Daniel stood there. No suit, no armor, just a soft blue button-up, sleeves rolled, hair slightly messy. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, a man carrying something heavy. He looked at her, not past her, not through her, at her, like she was real, like she mattered. She stepped aside without a word. He entered, slowly, like stepping into a memory. And then he saw them, two small boys, standing side by side in the living room, holding toy cars. They stared at him, wide-eyed, curious. He stopped in his tracks. The air seemed to go still. The boys whispered to each other. Then one of them stepped forward. "Are you the flower man?" Daniel blinked. "What?" The other boy giggled. "Mommy said someone helped with the flowers at the wedding." Daniel looked at Hannah, surprised. She looked down, expression unreadable. He knelt to their level, trying to keep his voice steady. "I used to help with flowers, but not as well as your mom. Did you come to play with us?" One of them asked, bright-eyed. He let out a small, shaky breath. "If it's okay, I'd love to." The boys looked at Hannah. She nodded once. They pulled him by the hand to the floor, showing him their toys, cars, puzzles, soft building blocks. He sat awkwardly at first, unsure of how to move, how to breathe around them. But slowly, their laughter melted his fear. One of them climbed into his lap. The other asked him to build a bridge. And Daniel found himself smiling, truly smiling. From the kitchen, Hannah watched in silence. Her hands trembled on the edge of the counter, watching him touch their hair, hearing them call him Flower Man, seeing their joy, pure, innocent, unknowing. She could barely breathe. When the boys ran upstairs to grab more toys, Daniel stood and faced her. His eyes were full. They're perfect." "They're not," she said quietly. "They're just children. Loud, clumsy, sometimes stubborn." "I wasn't talking about perfect in that way," he said, voice thick. "I meant they're real, alive, and that's more than I deserve." "You're right," she said. "It is." The weight of her honesty hit him hard. He lowered his gaze. "I don't know how to be a father," he admitted. "I didn't even know how to be a husband." "You weren't either." He looked at her, eyes stinging. "But," she continued, softer now, "that doesn't mean you can't learn. From them. Not for them, from them. They'll teach you if you listen." "I want to," he whispered. "Every day." She studied him for a long moment. "You don't get to come back in like nothing happened. They'll love anyone who shows up. They don't understand betrayal yet. But I do." He nodded slowly. "I don't want your forgiveness," he said. "I just want a place near them, even if that means staying outside the door." There was silence. Then, she said, "Sit." He blinked. "What? Sit?" she repeated, nodding to the kitchen table. He obeyed. She poured tea, the same kind they used to drink in the early mornings before everything broke. She placed it in front of him. He looked at it, then at her. "You remembered," he murmured. "I never forget things that mattered," she said. A beat passed. "I want to be honest," he said suddenly. About everything. She nodded. My stepmother forged letters, he began. Made me think you'd taken money, that you'd lied. I believed her, because I was afraid. Not just of her, of the world, of failing. You did fail, she said softly. He nodded, ashamed. I know. And then, when you told me about the babies, I panicked. I didn't feel ready. I wasn't strong enough. You chose fear. Yes, he admitted. I chose the coward's path. She looked out the window, eyes distant. I hated you for a long time. I hated myself longer. And now? She asked. He swallowed hard. Now I'm ready to live with the weight of it. To do the work. To give more than I take. The boys' laughter echoed from upstairs. Daniel stood slowly. I should go. She didn't stop him. But as he reached the door, she said, Come again tomorrow. Same time. He turned, surprised. I'll tell them who you are, she added. But only when you've shown me that you're not just here for a moment. If you're going to disappear again, don't come back. I won't, he promised. I mean it, Daniel. Don't break them the way you broke me. His eyes filled. I would rather die than hurt them. She nodded once, and then he left. The door closed behind him. But for the first time, Hannah didn't feel like she was the one being left behind. This time, she had control. This time, she had the power to choose who stayed. Hannah stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair in slow, distracted strokes. Her thoughts kept circling the same point. What if the boys loved him? What if they trusted him? And what if he broke them the way he broke her? She had told herself she was strong now. That time had turned the wound into armor. But strength, she was learning, didn't always feel like steel. Sometimes it felt like shaking hands and a heartbeat too loud to ignore. Mommy? One of the boys called from the hallway. Is the flower man coming again? She smiled tightly. He is. The other twin appeared beside his brother. Are we allowed to show him our treasure box today? She hesitated, then nodded. Only if you want to. The knock came exactly on time. A soft, careful sound, like he wasn't sure if he deserved to knock harder. When Hannah opened the door, Daniel stood there with a small paper bag in hand, awkward and hopeful. I brought honey bread, he said. I remembered you used to love it with tea. She took the bag, her fingers brushing his briefly. I don't eat much sweet anymore, she replied, but her voice had no bite. He smiled anyway. The boys ran to the door, shouting his name, still Flower Man. Not yet anything more. They grabbed his hand and dragged him inside like an old friend. He followed them willingly, kneeling to the floor without hesitation, allowing them to pile toy after toy into his lap. Their chatter was endless, unfiltered, pure. Hannah watched from the kitchen. They didn't see the man who abandoned them. They only saw the man who had come back, and that terrified her. After lunch, she pulled Daniel aside as the boys played in the backyard. They're too young to know the word, father, means anything different from safe. I understand, he said. I'm giving you access to them, she continued. But not to me. He looked down. That's fair. I mean it, Daniel. Don't confuse kindness with forgiveness. I'm not yours. Not anymore. I know, he said quietly. But that doesn't mean I'll stop caring for you. She exhaled, the words twisting something inside her. She wanted to believe him, but belief came at a cost. The boys came running back in, holding small rocks they claimed were magic. Daniel played along. He always had a gentle way with pretend, even years ago. But then one of them asked, Can you come to my school tomorrow? We have painting day. Daniel's smile faltered. Hannah stepped in gently. He's not sure yet. Maybe another time. The boy frowned, disappointed, then ran off to find crayons. Daniel looked at Hannah. I didn't want to say no. But you weren't ready to say yes, she said. He nodded, ashamed. She softened, just slightly. It's okay. This takes time. They may love fast, but I don't. Not anymore. I'll earn it, he promised. You don't earn forgiveness, she replied. You live worthy of it. That evening, as he prepared to leave, Daniel crouched beside the boys and whispered, "Thanks for letting me play with you." One of them leaned in and kissed his cheek. The other grinned. "You can come again if you bring more honey bread." Daniel laughed, voice cracking with emotion. "Deal." As he walked to the door, Hannah followed. Before he left, he paused. "Can I ask something?" She crossed her arms. "What?" "That day at the hospital. When you called my name, I heard it in a dream once. Or maybe I imagined it. Did you think of me?" Her breath caught. She hadn't expected that question. "I thought of who you used to be," she said, eyes burning. "Not who you were that day. I wanted that man to come back. Just for a second." He looked down. "I wanted to be him," he whispered. "I should have been." He stepped outside, but before she could close the door, he turned. "I'll come tomorrow," he said, "even if I only stand at the gate." She didn't reply, but she didn't close the door either. He took that as something more than permission. Later that night, after the boys were asleep, Hannah sat at her desk, the old journal open. She hadn't written in it for months. But tonight, the words returned, heavy and alive. They met him today, and they smiled. Not because he was perfect, but because they don't know broken promises yet. I envy that. I protect that. I fear it. I saw in his eyes the man I once loved. But I also saw the man who left me in pieces. How do I trust both things can exist in one person? Tomorrow he'll return, and I'll open the door again. Not for me, for them. But I'm afraid. I'm so afraid of letting go of anger, because it's the only thing that kept me standing this long. Her pen stilled. Then she turned the page. Blank. And maybe, just maybe, she'd let it stay that way for now, because some chapters couldn't be written yet. Not until she knew whether this was truly the beginning of something new, or just the final echo of something that should have ended long ago. "You're early," she said, stepping aside. "I didn't sleep," he admitted. "I thought, if I got here too late, you might change your mind." She raised an eyebrow. "You're learning." The boys were already at the table, coloring with markers and humming to themselves. They barely looked up before one of them shouted, "Flower man!" Daniel smiled as he knelt beside them. "I brought cinnamon bread this time. Want to share?" They cheered like he'd brought treasure. Hannah watched them for a moment. The way the boys had no hesitation, no fear of being left again, no memory of what he'd done. She sometimes envied that kind of heart. A heart that hadn't yet learned to brace itself for disappointment. Later, while the boys played outside under Mrs. Kim's watchful eye, Hannah and Daniel sat inside, the quiet between them as thick as fog. She poured tea. He didn't touch it. "There's something I need to ask," he said finally. She didn't look up. "Then ask. That day at the wedding, why did you come?" She looked at him now. "Because someone invited me with a job that felt too personal to be random. I knew it was you." "Then why accept it?" She exhaled slowly, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I wanted to see if you still had a face." His brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "I wanted to know if I'd made you up," she whispered. "If the man I remembered, the one who kissed my forehead in hospital rooms and promised me forever, ever truly existed. Or if he was just a beautiful lie I needed to believe in at the time." Daniel lowered his head. Shame painted his expression. "And?" he asked quietly. "I saw your face," she said. "But I didn't see him. Not right away." There was silence. He spoke again, but softer this time. "Do you see him now?" Her throat tightened. "I see someone trying," she said. "But I also see someone who can walk away again if it gets too hard. And I don't have the strength left to gamble on maybes." Daniel leaned forward. "I'm not walking away. Not again. Even if it kills me." "You say that now," she said, "when things are quiet. But you said a lot of things before." His voice broke. "And I regret all of them." She nodded slowly, then stood and walked to the window, watching the boys chase one another across the yard, their laughter spilling into the breeze like sunlight. "You left before they had names," she said without turning. "You weren't there when they cried for the first time, or when one of them stopped breathing in his sleep, and I had to hold him for hours to make sure he didn't slip away. Daniel stood, his hands clenched at his sides. I would have come if I'd known. But you didn't ask, she cut in, her voice sharp. You didn't check. You signed the papers and walked out like I was a burden you were finally allowed to let go of. I was scared, he said. And weak. I was scared too, she said, finally turning around. But I stayed. I fought. I bled. I carried them. I carried us. While you lived behind boardroom doors and luxury silence. The pain in her voice shattered something in him. I don't know how to fix what I broke, he whispered. But if there's even a crack in the door, I'll wait outside forever. She looked at him, really looked at him. There were lines around his eyes now. His shoulders weren't as proud. He looked older, not from time but from remorse. I'm not asking you to wait, she said after a long pause. But I am asking you not to force your way back into a space you abandoned. He nodded, slowly. Then she surprised him. But if you want to be here, really be here, then I'll let them decide. He blinked. What do you mean? They trust you now because they don't know you yet. If they grow to love you, not because I say you're safe, but because you are safe, then maybe I'll believe it too. Daniel's voice was low, full of something desperate and quiet. And if they don't, then you'll respect that, she said. And you'll go. He swallowed hard. I will. She moved toward the door, but then turned. Tomorrow, she said, there's a community event for parents and children. Music, dancing, food. They want to go. He nodded slowly, understanding what she was offering. A chance. A test. I'll be there, he said. You'd better. She left the room, the weight of her offer heavy behind her. Daniel stood in the silence of the living room, hands shaking slightly, unsure if what he felt was relief or fear. Out the window, he watched his sons laugh as the wind tugged at their shirts and their feet stomped joy into the earth. He had missed their first words, their first steps, their first everything. But maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't miss everything else. And maybe, tomorrow, he would find out if the door to a life he once destroyed was beginning to creak open again. Not because of what he said, but because of how he chose to stay. Hannah stood beneath one of the paper lanterns, holding the twins' hands as they tugged her toward the painting table. She had dressed simply, but there was something soft in the way her hair was pinned, something warmer in her smile today. Not because she was sure, but because she was ready to try. She scanned the crowd, instinctively, and there he was. Daniel stood across the square, holding two small stuffed toys in his hands, clearly unsure of what to do with them. His eyes found hers instantly, as if the rest of the world had blurred around her. He took a breath, walked forward slowly. Are those for them? She asked as he approached. He nodded. I thought, maybe they'd like to have something. They don't know how to fake liking things, she replied. If they hug them, it's real. He looked nervous. The boys spotted him and ran forward. Flower man, one of them called out. You came. I promised, didn't I? Daniel said, kneeling as they rushed into his arms. He held them, his hands shaking from the contact, from the reality of it. This was no longer a memory or a regret. This was now. I brought you something, he said, offering them the toys. The boys squealed and hugged them tight. They like it, Hannah murmured. He looked up at her, eyes softening. It's the first time I've seen them in sunlight. She tilted her head. What do you mean? In all my dreams, he said quietly. It was always raining. They sat together later on the edge of the square, watching the boys paint their hands and press them onto paper hearts. The community band began playing, and parents started to dance, spinning children in their arms. One of the boys ran up. Can he dance with us, Mommy? Hannah paused. Daniel didn't speak. She looked at her son, then at the man still kneeling beside him, waiting. Not pushing, not assuming, just hoping. She nodded. He can. The boy grabbed Daniel's hand and pulled him into the circle. Hannah watched as Daniel stumbled at first, out of rhythm, awkward, but then began to smile as his son twirled under his arm. The other twin joined in, and Daniel held both their hands. moving with them in small, clumsy steps. It wasn't graceful, but it was real. Hannah looked away, tears threatening to rise. Mrs. Kim appeared beside her, folding her arms, eyes on the scene. "They don't know he's their father, do they?" "Not yet," Hannah said. "They just call him Flower Man." Mrs. Kim nodded. "And when will you tell them?" "When I believe he'll stay long enough for that word to mean something." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in orange and lavender. As the event wound down, Daniel brought the boys back to her, both of them laughing, faces smudged with paint. "They had fun," he said breathlessly. Hannah looked at him. "You're tired," he chuckled. "They're stronger than I am." The boys pulled on her sleeve. "Can he come home with us today?" She looked down at them, unsure. "Please," one of them added, "just for bedtime stories." She hesitated. Then finally, she said, "Okay, one story." The boys jumped in excitement, running ahead toward home. Daniel fell into step beside her, hands in his pockets. "I didn't expect this." She kept her eyes ahead. "Expect what?" "That you'd let me come close." "I'm not letting you in," she said. "I'm letting them see who you are." He nodded slowly. "And who do?" "You see." She stopped walking. Then she turned to him, her voice quiet but unwavering. "I see a man who's still deciding if he's going to run again." He swallowed hard. "I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now," she said. "But when you loved me before, you promised forever." And forever lasted until it became inconvenient. Her words landed like a blade. But she didn't wait for him to respond. She turned and walked ahead, following the sound of her children's laughter, her shoulders stiff with memory. That night, in the soft glow of the nursery, Daniel sat between the two small beds, holding an open book. The boys leaned against him, drowsy and content. He read slowly, pausing at each page so they could admire the pictures. Hannah stood at the doorway, watching. He glanced up once and saw her there. And in that glance, she saw something different. Not the pride, not the guilt, but grief. The grief of a man realizing what he had missed, and what he might never fully earn back. He finished the story and kissed each boy's forehead, pausing as their eyes closed and sleep took them. He rose and walked past her silently, stopping in the hallway. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For trusting me with their silence." She didn't answer, but she didn't close the door when he stepped outside. Instead, she stayed in the hallway long after he was gone, listening to the quiet breathing of the two little souls that had changed everything, and asking herself the question she hadn't dared speak aloud. What if he stays? Because if he stays, she'll have to start unlearning all the ways she's taught herself to survive without him. And that may be the scariest part of all. He stayed through playtime, through dinner, through the gentle routines that made up Hannah's world. Folding laundry while the boys sang in the bath, stacking puzzle pieces, whispering bedtime stories. But he never crossed the invisible line she had drawn. He didn't ask for more. He only showed up, again and again, quiet, steady, present. And that was what began to scare her the most, because it was working. Tonight, she sat by the window after the house had gone still, journal open again on her lap. But no words came. Instead, her eyes drifted to the garden, the place where he always stood before knocking. And the memory played in her mind, again and again. How gently he'd kissed the boys' heads that evening. How his voice had cracked when one of them sleepily whispered, "Don't go too far." She pressed her hand over her chest, as if to contain something rising, something she wasn't sure she wanted anymore. Then, just as she closed the journal, her phone vibrated on the table. A message from an unknown number. "Meet me, please. It's about Hannah. About the will. JM." She froze, her breath hitched in her throat. She hadn't heard that name in years. Minji, the woman Daniel had once chosen. The one whose shadow had been woven into every betrayal. Her stepmother-in-law. Her replacement. Her ghost. The next line came before she could even move. "I was wrong. I need to speak with you before someone else does." She stared at the message for a long time, then looked toward the boys' room. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, she had packed a bag for the twins and walked them across the path to Mrs. Kim's house. "You'll stay with her today," she said softly, kneeling. "Just for a little while. Will Flower Man come?" one of them asked, yawning. "He might," she said, forcing a smile. Tell him I had something important to do." They nodded, already distracted by toys. As she walked away, the wind felt colder. She took the train. The city greeted her like it always had, tall, distant, uncaring. But this time she didn't flinch. She carried herself differently now. Not with confidence, but with experience. Like a woman who knew what it was to be broken, and still chose to walk forward anyway. The cafe was tucked on a quiet side street, sleek and too polished, the kind of place that smelled more like power than coffee. And there, in a back booth, sat Minji. She was exactly the same, elegant, composed, wearing tailored ivory and an expression that belonged to someone who had never once been told no. Hannah approached slowly. "You came," Minji said without looking up. "You said it was about the will." Minji nodded and pushed a folder across the table. Hannah didn't touch it. "Why now?" she asked. Minji finally met her gaze. "Because Daniel's destroying everything I built." Hannah blinked. "Excuse me? The company, the legacy. He's pulling out of deals, selling off assets, moving money into some ridiculous foundation in your mother's name. Everything's unraveling. And this concerns me how?" Minji leaned in. "Because you were supposed to disappear. That was the deal." Hannah narrowed her eyes. "What deal?" "I made sure you got nothing in the will. I convinced his father you were using him. And after the divorce, I cleaned up the mess. You got peace, I got power. Fair exchange." Hannah's voice turned ice cold. "You took everything from me." "I took what you were never meant to have," Minji said calmly. "But now he's bringing your name up in board meetings. He's talking about healing the family name. And the problem is, you're not gone. You're here. And that makes you a threat." Hannah's breath caught. "So you're warning me?" "I'm giving you a choice," Minji said. "Take this folder. Inside is a settlement. Quiet money. Enough to disappear forever. For you. For your boys." Hannah looked down at the folder. Then up. "I'm not for sale." Minji's smile faded. "Then prepare yourself." "For what?" "For everything you built to be pulled into the light. The press. The speculation. The blood test requests. The headlines. Tycoon's bastard twins resurface. Ex-wife speaks out." Hannah stood, voice steady. "You're not afraid of me. You're afraid of the truth." "I'm afraid of chaos," Minji snapped. Hannah leaned down, voice low. "Then you should have stayed out of my life. You should have let me mourn in peace. But you came looking for a war." Minji's lips parted. But Hannah was already walking away. She didn't look back. Not when Minji called her name. Not when the folder was left behind. She walked back to the train with shaking hands, fire in her chest. She had come thinking she'd face ghosts, but she'd faced something worse. Proof that she had been right all along. She had been erased, silenced, stripped of a life. And now the person responsible was afraid of what she might become. When she returned home, the sun was already dipping low. She rushed toward the house, wind tangling her hair. And there on the porch sat Daniel. The twins were asleep beside him, heads resting on his lap. He looked up when he heard her steps, concern flashing in his eyes. "Where were you?" he asked, gently laying the boys onto the bench beside him. She didn't speak. He stood. "Hannah, what happened?" She stared at him. And then, the words came out before she could stop them. "She took me out of the will. She erased my name. She offered me money today to disappear forever." Daniel's face went white. "She?" he whispered. "Minji," she said, his jaw clenched, rage rising. "I need to fix this." "No," she interrupted. "You need to hear something first." He froze. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I don't want courtrooms or press. I don't want your money. But I need to know something." "Anything," he said, stepping closer. "When I was carrying your sons," she whispered. "And you left? Did you know what they were going to be?" He blinked. "What do you mean? Did you see them as burdens or possibilities? Did you ever imagine loving them?" Daniel's voice cracked. "I didn't imagine anything, because I was too much of a coward to dream. I shut everything off so I wouldn't feel what I knew I was destroying." Tears gathered in her eyes. "And now?" He reached out, hand trembling, and gently placed it over hers. "Now, I dream of them every night," he whispered, "and it kills me that they don't even know they're mine." Hannah's voice broke. "They will." He looked at her, stunned. Too early. He stood outside the gate, eyes fixed on the little house that had become more like a home than anything he'd ever known. The weight of Hannah's words from the night before still lived in his chest, heavy and alive. "I'll tell them, but when I do, you better be ready to be more than a dream." He hadn't slept. He had sat in his apartment staring at photos of the boys he'd secretly taken during their last few afternoons together. Blurry, full of movement, full of light. His sons. The idea still twisted something in his heart. Not a theory, not a maybe. The front door opened slowly. Hannah stepped out, coat wrapped around her. Hair swept back into a loose braid. "They're getting dressed," she said, her voice calm. "We're going to the beach today. It's their favorite place." He took a tentative step closer. "Should I come?" She looked at him, eyes unreadable. "Yes, today, you come as their father." Daniel's breath hitched. He didn't speak. He couldn't. "I'll tell them when we get there," she said. "It should be outside, with open sky." He nodded slowly, emotion swelling in his throat. She turned back toward the house. "They already love you, you know? You don't have to earn that part." "But I want to," he murmured. "I know," she said without turning. "That's why I'm letting you try." The beach was quiet by the time they arrived. Pale sand stretching wide beneath the clouded sky, soft waves brushing the shore like secrets. The boys ran ahead, shouting and laughing, kicking off their shoes, already tugging at Daniel's hand to build castles and look for shells. Daniel dropped to his knees beside them, shaping towers from damp sand, pretending they were building a kingdom. And Hannah watched. She watched the man she had once begged to care now kneel in the sand, completely immersed in the wonder of two small boys who didn't yet understand what he was to them. When the sun pushed through the clouds and cast golden light across the water, Hannah stepped closer. "Come here," she said, calling gently to the boys. "I want to tell you something." They came without hesitation, sitting in the sand on either side of her. Daniel sat behind them, quiet, almost holding his breath. She took one of each of their hands in hers. "You know how every family has a story?" she began. "Some stories are loud, some are quiet. Ours started with a storm, a very big storm." They listened, wide-eyed. But something beautiful came after it. Something brave. One of the boys tilted his head. "What is it?" Hannah looked at Daniel. He swallowed. Then she turned back to the boys, her voice trembling now. "Do you know why the flower man always comes back?" "Because he likes us," one said. "Because we're fun," the other added. She smiled through tears. "Yes, but also, because he's your daddy." The world went still. The boys blinked, as if trying to understand something much bigger than themselves. "He's our daddy?" Hannah nodded slowly. "He didn't know how to be one at first. He was very scared. But now he wants to be here. Not just to play, to stay. If you want him to." The smaller twin crawled closer to Daniel and stared up at him. "Are you really our dad?" Daniel's voice broke. "Yes, I am. And I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner." The boy reached out and touched his face, as if trying to feel the truth. "You look like us," he said with a shy smile. Daniel laughed, choked, unsteady. "You look better than I ever did." The other twin crawled onto his lap and held on tight. "I don't care if you're late," he whispered. "You're here now." And that was when Daniel wept. Not the silent guilt he had carried for years, but open, broken tears. He held both boys against his chest and looked up at Hannah, who stood watching with arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Thank you," he mouthed. She didn't smile. She simply nodded. The day stretched on. They played. They ran. They sang. And for a moment, it was almost easy to forget the years that had been stolen from them. But as the sun began to set, Daniel's phone rang. He didn't want to answer, but the name on the screen froze his blood. Chairman Min. He stepped away, pressing the phone to his ear. "Yes," a cold voice responded. "You need to come home. Now." "Why?" "There's been an emergency." Minji went public. Daniel's heart dropped. What did she do? She released statements, photos, claims about the children. The press is already spinning it. Rumors of hidden heirs, scandal, betrayal. The family name is under fire. Daniel's breath caught. He turned to see the boys laughing as they splashed their feet in the edge of the tide. Hannah sat on a driftwood log, finally smiling, her face lit by gold. "I don't care about the name," he said. The voice on the other end grew colder. "Then you don't deserve it." Daniel hung up without another word. He stood for a long time, the wind blowing against his back, the weight of legacy pressing hard against his spine. He looked back at the people who were now his world, and he made his choice. He walked back to them, took Hannah's hand without asking. She looked at him. "They're coming for us," he said quietly. "All of them. Cameras, questions, rumors." She didn't flinch. "Then let them," she said. He blinked. "You're not a scandal," she whispered. "You're a father. They're not a stain on your legacy. They are your legacy." He closed his eyes, overwhelmed. "And me?" he asked. She studied him. "You're the one who gets to decide what kind of man you'll be when the world starts looking." The wind carried her words out to sea. "You knew they'd come. I just didn't think it would be this fast." "You should've," she said. The back door of the lead car opened, and Minji stepped out. Not like a woman who had lost, but like one who had prepared her next move. She didn't wear her usual pearls or designer suit today. She wore control, minimal makeup, black dress, flats, calculated humility, and behind her, two men in suits stepped out. Legal team, press advisors. Whatever they were, they reeked of damage control. Minji smiled like this was a brunch. "Daniel," she said smoothly. "Hannah, lovely little town." "No cameras?" Hannah asked sharply, glancing around. "Not yet," Minji replied. "You should be thanking me. I kept the headlines clean, for now." Daniel stepped forward. "Why are you here?" "I'm here because you're making a mistake," Minji said. "You don't understand the kind of storm you're inviting." "I'm not inviting anything," Daniel said. "I'm choosing my family." She tilted her head. "You mean the one you abandoned 3 years ago?" The words landed hard. Hannah didn't flinch, but Daniel's jaw tightened. Minji stepped closer, her eyes shifting toward Hannah. "I warned you," she said softly. "I told you what would happen if you came back." "And I told you," Hannah answered. "I'm not afraid of the truth." "You should be." One of the suited men stepped forward, handing Daniel a thin envelope. Daniel didn't take it. "What is it?" he asked. "Cease and desist," Minji replied. "Regarding the use of the Min family name, brand affiliation, and unauthorized paternity claims, and a formal motion questioning the legitimacy of the children's lineage." Hannah blinked. She felt something twist deep in her chest. Not pain, not fear, rage. "You're saying my children don't exist?" "I'm saying," Minji said coldly, "that unless you want to destroy what's left of your name, you'll take the money, sign the documents, and disappear again. Both of you." Daniel took the envelope, looked at it, then slowly, without breaking eye contact, tore it in half. Then again, and again. The papers fell to the dirt like broken promises. Minji's eyes narrowed. "You're going to regret this." "I already regret everything I let you do," he said. "I regret believing you. I regret giving you power. I regret every second I spent running from the life I should have chosen from the beginning." Minji laughed softly, shaking her head. You think this ends with some defiance on a porch? The moment the public sees that woman holding your children, you'll be crucified. She'll be called a mistress. They'll dig up her past. Yours. Headlines you can't undo. Daniel turned to Hannah. His voice dropped into something gentle. Go inside. I'll handle this. No, Hannah said. She stepped forward, placing herself directly in front of Minji, just close enough to let her voice tremble without showing it. You've built your entire world on the idea that shame is a weapon. But I've lived through shame, Minji. I've eaten with it, slept beside it, given birth under its weight. You can't scare me with it now. Minji's jaw tightened. You don't belong in this family. I don't want to, Hannah said. Families are more than names on buildings and headlines in magazines. Families show up. Mine was never your legacy. It's mine. Minji turned to Daniel. This is the woman you're destroying your name for? He didn't even hesitate. Yes. And that finally cracked her. Minji stepped back, her face hardening, mask slipping just enough to reveal the fury beneath. She gestured for the men to follow her back to the car. As she reached the door, she looked over her shoulder. The press will come, and when they do, don't expect sympathy. We don't want sympathy, Hannah said. We have truth. With that, the car door slammed, and the engines roared back to life, disappearing down the road. The silence afterward was deafening. Daniel turned to Hannah. Her breathing was unsteady. Her hands were shaking now, visible against the fading light. Are you okay? He asked, stepping close. No, she said honestly. But I will be. She turned and went inside without another word. Daniel followed only after the front door clicked shut. That night, Hannah stood in the kitchen long after the boys had gone to sleep. The kettle was whistling. She wasn't even trying to make tea. She just needed noise. Daniel entered quietly. He didn't speak, just leaned against the counter, watching her. I thought I was done being humiliated, she said softly. But today, standing there, I realized how much pride I still had left to lose. You didn't lose anything, he said. I almost lost myself again. I let her get into my head. The way she looked at them, like they were mistakes. Daniel stepped forward. They're not mistakes. She looked up at him, eyes full of exhaustion. Then you better be ready to fight for them, she said, voice trembling. Because I won't let them grow up wondering if they're too much of a scandal to love. I am ready, he said. But this time, I won't fight from behind you. I'll fight beside you. The kettle finally clicked off. Silence returned. She stared at him for a long time. Then, quietly, she said, I'm tired, Daniel. I know. Not just from today. From all of it. The pretending. The surviving. The silence. I know, he said again, stepping even closer. And then, softly, he reached for her hand. Mystery woman linked to heir of Min dynasty. Children involved? No photos. Just vague language and a single quote from an anonymous source. But by the third day, the headline had changed. Secret family? Daniel Min's abandoned wife and hidden twins emerge in coastal town. And this time, there were photos. Blurry shots of Hannah holding the boys' hands outside the flower shop. A distant image of Daniel on the porch. Then the doorbell rang. Hannah froze mid-step. It rang again. Loud, insistent, impatient. Daniel rushed in from the back room, voice low. Don't open it. But it was too late. The boys had already run to the front window. There's a camera, one of them shouted. Mommy, someone's filming. Daniel moved quickly, closing the curtain, lifting both boys into his arms. Go to your room, Hannah said, her voice tight, shaking. Now. The doorbell rang again, and again, then a knock. A man's voice outside. Miss Lee, we just want to comment. Were you and Mr. Min ever married legally? Are those his biological children? Another voice, sharper. Are you seeking financial compensation from the Min family? Hannah backed away from the door, her breath short. How did they find us so fast? Daniel stood still, one hand bracing the wall. Minji gave them everything. Photos, locations, maybe even your medical records. My medical? I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't think she'd go that far. You didn't think? Hannah snapped, her voice breaking. You never think until it's already falling apart. The boys returned from their room, frightened. Mommy, why are there men outside? Why are they yelling? Hannah crouched, pulled them close. It's okay. We're safe. They just don't understand. Daniel turned to her. We need to leave, just for a few days. I can take you somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. And run, she whispered. Again. No, not to hide, to protect them. She looked at her children, wide-eyed, confused, trusting her completely. And that's what terrified her. Because one wrong move and she wouldn't be protecting them anymore. She'd be teaching them to fear who they were. We're not leaving, she said. Hannah, they're not ghosts, she said fiercely. They're not secrets to be buried. I've buried enough. Daniel didn't argue. He sat down on the couch beside her as the shouting outside continued. She pulled the boys into her lap. Daniel wrapped an arm around all three of them. We'll get through this, he whispered. Will we? She asked. He nodded, but his eyes weren't so sure. That night, the shop stayed dark. The windows stayed closed. And for the first time in months, Hannah turned the lock twice. The next morning, a letter was slid under the door. Hannah picked it up, hands trembling. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten, neat, familiar. I never meant to be your enemy, but you brought this on yourself. JM. She stared at it for a long time. Daniel took it from her hands and tore it in two without speaking. Then his phone rang. He didn't want to answer it, but he did. His voice was low. This is Daniel. A pause. Then, yes, I understand. I'll speak with her. He hung up. Hannah stood across the room, arms crossed. What was that? A press conference, he said. They want me to clarify everything. The board's losing control. Shareholders are demanding answers. Are you going? I have to, he said quietly. She looked at him. You're going to stand on a stage and tell the world about us? I'm going to stand on a stage and tell the world I should have never left you. Silence. Her voice was barely above a whisper. And what if they don't forgive you? I'm not asking them to, he said. I'm asking you. She turned away, chest rising with 100 unspoken things. I don't know what forgiveness looks like anymore, she said. I only know that if you lie this time, even once, you won't just lose us. You'll destroy us. He walked up behind her, gently placing his hand on her back. I'll speak the truth, he promised. Every ugly part of it. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she let herself lean into him. Just slightly, just enough. The next morning, Daniel stood in front of flashing lights and microphones, reporters shouting questions. He took a breath and began. My name is Daniel Min, he said, and the rumors are true. The room fell silent. I was married. I left. I walked away from the woman I loved and the children I didn't have the courage to meet. I was a coward, and I've spent 3 years trying to live like none of it mattered. But it did. It matters more than anything. Reporters scribbled, cameras clicked. I'm not here to spin a story, he continued. I'm here to take responsibility for abandoning my family, for believing lies, for letting fear control my choices. A voice from the back shouted, Are they really your children? Daniel nodded. They are. I don't need a test to tell me that. I see myself in every breath they take. But if the world needs proof, then let it be tested. I have nothing left to hide. Another question, and the woman? He smiled softly. She's the strongest person I've ever known. And if the world's smart, they'll start listening to people like her instead of tearing them apart. The crowd was quiet until the applause began. Not all of them clapped, but some did. And Daniel knew it was a beginning. Back home, Hannah sat in front of the screen, watching every word. Her sons sat beside her, one holding her hand, the other resting his head against her shoulder. "Is he telling the truth?" one of them asked. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "He finally is." She hadn't moved since the screen went dark. Daniel's voice still echoed in her head. "I have nothing left to hide. She's the strongest person I've ever known." Every word had been true. Every word had pierced her like a memory she thought she'd buried. But truth alone didn't erase time, or pain, or absence. She gently laid the boys down in their room, kissed their foreheads, and returned to the kitchen. She poured water she didn't drink. She paced a room she'd already cleaned. The knock on the door startled her. Soft, once, then again. She opened it slowly, and there he was. Daniel. No suit, no camera lights, just him. Raw and exhausted, eyes red, shirt slightly wrinkled like he hadn't rested since standing in front of the world and telling them who he really was. "You saw it," he said. She nodded. He hesitated. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. He walked in, looked around like it was the first time again. She closed the door behind him. "You did what you promised," she said. "I meant every word." She crossed her arms. "So, now what? You're free. The truth is out. There's no one left to hide from." He looked at her, truly looked at her. "I'm not free," he said. "I don't feel free. I feel like I've just stepped out of a prison I built with my own hands." He sat down at the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. "And now I'm afraid," he whispered. "Of what?" "That I've waited too long to fix what I broke." She stood there, silent. "Do you want to fix it?" she finally asked. "Or do you want to just not feel guilty anymore?" He looked up sharply, her question cutting deeper than any headline had. "I want you," he said quietly. "I want us. Not just for the boys. Not to clean up a scandal. I want this life. The one I should have chosen before I lost it." "You can't just want it," she said. "You have to live it. Every day. Through the boredom. Through the fear. Through the resentment I'm still learning how to let go of." He nodded, slowly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight," he said. "But I'm asking you to let me show up tomorrow. And the next day. And the next." He stood, walked to her slowly. "I will make breakfast. I will braid their hair. I will clean the floors. Hold them when they cry. Hold you when you're too tired to stand." Her breath hitched. "I will stay," he said. "Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." She turned her face away, but he gently reached out, fingers just brushing her cheek. "Say something," he whispered. She looked at him, eyes burning. "I'm scared to believe you. I know. I'm scared that if I open my heart again, and you leave, I won't. You did once. I won't again." They stood there, suspended in the kind of silence that can only exist between two people who once shattered each other and are now trying to rebuild with hands still bleeding. Then, quietly, she stepped closer. She leaned her head against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her slowly, like he was afraid she'd vanish. "I hate that I still love you," she whispered. He exhaled, voice cracking. "I don't deserve that." "I know," she said, and still, she stayed there, letting herself rest in the arms that had once let her fall. Because something in her, something bruised but not broken, wanted to believe this wasn't a repeat of the past, but the beginning of something entirely new, something earned. He kissed the top of her head. "I will never leave again," he said. "Don't make promises you don't plan to keep." "This one," he whispered, "I'll die keeping." They didn't speak after that. Not that night. They simply sat on the couch, her hand in his, their fingers interlaced like threads weaving something fragile, something honest. And in the quiet, she didn't say it, but she let herself think it. But the night had worn him down, and sometime between guilt and gratitude, his body had given in to rest. He blinked himself awake as he heard soft footsteps padding down the stairs. Tiny ones. One of the boys, the younger twin, stood near the bottom step, rubbing his eyes, his blanket trailing behind him. Daniel stood slowly. "Hey, buddy." The boy tilted his head, then walked straight up and held out his arms. Daniel hesitated. Just a second. Then he knelt and picked him up. "Can't sleep," The boy shook his head and buried his face in Daniel's shoulder. Daniel's heart ached with a kind of fullness he hadn't earned. But he held on, gently, like something holy had been entrusted to him. He didn't hear Hannah come down the stairs until she was already in the kitchen, starting the kettle. She didn't speak, but when she glanced at him, holding their child like he'd always known how, something softened in her. "I was going to let you sleep a bit longer," she said quietly. "I didn't want to sleep," he replied. "But he came to me. I didn't expect that." "They both do that sometimes," she said, pouring hot water into a cup. "If they feel something's shifting, they come closer." Daniel held the boy a little tighter. "They can feel it?" "They always could," she said, placing the cup on the table. "Even in the womb. When I cried, they'd kick harder. When I forced myself to sing, they'd go still, like they were listening."